There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't look like tears. It looks like silence. It's that quiet moment after another unanswered message, after another version of "I'm just busy," after your heart has performed somersaults trying to be seen. And then, without drama, without final words, you stop. You no longer check if he's watched your story. You no longer scan the room for his energy, not because you're over him, but because something in you has turned inward and reclaimed itself. You once thought your love was the proof of your worth. But now, something older, wiser, deeper inside you is asking, what if ignoring him isn't rejection, it's revelation? Not a punishment, not a tactic, but a return. A return to the place where your power was never in how much you could give, but in how quietly you could walk away without losing your center. This is not a video about strategy, it's a message about remembrance. Because the feminine doesn't chase, she magnetizes, she moves inward. She becomes the still mirror where a man must finally see himself. And if he has depth, he will come toward the woman who no longer performs, not to win her back, but to meet himself more fully. If this is already stirring something in you, take a moment to like the video. It helps this truth find the women who are ready to stop performing and start remembering. Let's go deeper. To understand why your silence holds so much power, we have to go beneath the surface, into the symbolic, into the psychological, into the territory Carl Jung spent his life mapping. You see, what you represented to him was never just you. Not your eyes. Not your laugh. Not your beauty. He didn't fall in love with your details. He fell in love with his reflection inside your presence. Jung called this projection, the psyche's tendency to see what it longs for in another person. And for a man, the most potent projection is the anima, the inner feminine. She is emotion, she is intuition, she is his access to softness, to vulnerability, to the feeling states he's often been taught to suppress. And when he meets you, especially you who are emotionally aware, grounded, magnetic without trying, he doesn't see you clearly. He sees the symbol, the soul-encoded echo of something inside himself that he's been exiled from. You were not a woman to him. You were a doorway. You weren't just someone he liked. You were a mirror where his unlived self was awakened. Not because you did anything special, but because your energy held what his unconscious was starving for. This is why he was drawn to you in the first place. You activated something in him. Something wordless, something beyond logic. You didn't entertain him. You moved something in his emotional architecture. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Men don't fall in love through attention. They fall in love through activation. The stirring of dormant parts of themselves that only come alive in your presence. And that's why your silence is not emptiness. It is the collapse of the mirror. The threshold closes, the doorway disappears, and he is left standing not in absence but in confrontation with himself. You didn't just hold space for him. You held a reflection of the man he could be, until your energy stopped holding it. He didn't desire your body. He desired the part of himself that felt alive around you. And so when you withdraw, not with anger but with quiet dignity, his ego doesn't understand it, but his unconscious does. Something in him begins to stir, not because he misses the texts or the validation or the comfort, but because the image, the symbol, the feeling is gone. He remembers you not as a person, but as a moment of awakening. And if he's emotionally underdeveloped, he will confuse that loss with control. He may chase you not because he loves you, but because he cannot stand the feeling of being cut off from that inner reflection. That's not your responsibility. That's his journey. But if he has depth, if he has the capacity for shadow work, your silence will not repel him. It will summon him, because it forces him inward. It strips away the egoic game. It makes him ask the deeper question, what was she holding that I couldn't hold in myself? That's the alchemy of projection. And when you stop feeding the projection, when you stop being his mirror, he is forced to meet the raw wall of his own inner void. Your silence is not rejection. It is a sacred interruption. You are no longer playing the role he unconsciously assigned to you. You have stepped out of the myth he projected. And now the story collapses. The fantasy dissolves, and the real work begins. If you're feeling seen right now, I invite you to comment below. What part of this feels like your story? Your reflection may just help another woman reclaim her center. Because here's the truth. Ignoring a man the right way is not cruel. It's conscious. It's sacred. It's a reclamation of your energetic space. And it's also an invitation, if he's ready, to meet you on a level beyond performance. You don't have to speak to be heard. You don't have to explain your silence. In fact, the soul speaks most clearly through what is not said. And if you're wondering why he starts paying attention after you've pulled away, this is why. It's not because you became more valuable when you disappeared. It's because he finally had to face the depth of what your presence symbolized and what it now asks of him. Stillness is not emptiness. Detachment is not indifference. Your quiet withdrawal is not a wall. It's a mirror he can no longer look away from. And that is where true transformation begins. Let's begin with the part of him that noticed you first. Not his eyes, not his hands, but his ego. When a man first meets you, it is often his ego that assesses your beauty, your energy, your availability. His unconscious, though, is already doing something far more ancient. It's scanning for resonance, for emotional contrast, for something rare enough to feel sacred. And you, without performing, offered that contrast, not because you were trying to be rare, but because you were whole. Unknowable, not easily possessed. Something in you, even in love, remained untouchable. That untouchability, that's what he's drawn to. That's the energetic current that makes a man feel both pulled and destabilized in your presence. You see, the feminine doesn't become magnetic by trying. She becomes magnetic by being, by becoming the quiet, consistent center of her own field, where the energy is no longer leaving her body in pursuit, but circling within her like a gravitational pull. And that's where the paradox begins. Ignoring him, not out of anger, not out of game playing, but out of truth, is often the first time your energy stays with you. And he feels that, not consciously. He may not even understand it. But the part of him that was feeding off your constant availability, your curiosity, your emotional labor, now feels a sudden emptiness, a disturbance. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." The masculine ego resists not being the center of your orbit, and when you stop giving him that position, he doesn't just feel your absence, he becomes obsessed with resolving it. Why? Because your silence creates scarcity, and scarcity to the ego equals value. The less access he has to you, the more his mind works to rebuild the connection. Not because he now magically sees your worth, but because the part of him that felt inflated by your attention is now shrinking, and the ego cannot bear to shrink without protest. But this is where your power deepens. You're not starving him of affection. You're removing his emotional feeding tube. You are breaking the loop where he came to you for reflection, for validation, for the soothing he wouldn't give himself. And so, the chase begins. Not after you, but after the part of himself that disappeared when you disappeared. This is the secret few people will tell you. A man doesn't chase the woman who leaves. He chases the feeling of significance, power, and emotional clarity he experienced when he was in her presence. Your absence forces him into emotional withdrawal, and he'll do anything to feel that warmth again. Even if he doesn't yet understand, it wasn't really about you. It was about who he became around you. This is why ignoring works, not because it's manipulative, but because it shifts the energetic field. You are no longer giving, no longer reaching, no longer stabilizing his emotional volatility with your certainty. And the masculine ego, disoriented, begins to panic. She's not supposed to leave, he thinks. She's supposed to stay. She's supposed to wait. She's supposed to soothe. She's supposed to keep choosing me, no matter how little I offer. This is the myth you dismantle the moment you become energetically unavailable. And let's be very clear, energetic unavailability is not cruelty. It's clarity. It's no longer pouring energy into someone who responds with confusion. It's no longer staying in proximity to someone who doesn't rise to meet your depth. It is spiritual alignment over romantic effort. When you stop texting, when you stop reaching, when you stop making yourself easy to access, he is forced into confrontation, not with you, but with the emotional void you used to fill. And here's what matters most. That void was never about the loss of your body, or your affection, or your updates. That void is the psychic break that occurs when the mirror disappears. You were never just someone he loved. You were a portal into his unlived emotions, into the longing he couldn't name, into the tenderness he's never felt safe enough to express. And now, when you're gone, he doesn't just lose a connection. He loses the version of himself that felt most alive when he was next to you. Do you understand the power in that? You don't need to punish him. Life will. His own soul will. His own dreams will. You don't need to prove your value. The echo of your presence is already doing that work for you. And so he begins to check your stories, revisit your photos, linger on old messages. Not because he's remembering facts, but because he's trying to resurrect a frequency that now only lives in memory. He starts to invent reasons to contact you. His ego may dress it up as anger, sarcasm, curiosity, but underneath every message is the real cry. Bring me back to myself, the self I only knew through you. But here's where your discernment must speak louder than your ache. Just because he's chasing doesn't mean he's ready, and just because he misses you doesn't mean he sees you. Remember, your silence broke a pattern, and patterns don't die quietly. He will test the perimeter of your boundary. He'll look for old access points. He may say the right words. He may even perform emotion. But what you're listening for now isn't his story. It's his structure. Has his inner world changed? Has he entered his own shadow? Has he done the work to become the man who can hold space not just for your beauty, but for your silence? If not, your absence must remain, because ignoring him the right way is not about withholding. It's about redefining the terms of your energetic availability. You are no longer willing to be a therapist he doesn't pay, a muse he doesn't honor, a mirror he only looks into when he feels small. You are the void now, not empty, not bitter, not cold, just sovereign. And in that sovereignty, your energy becomes magnetic again, not to his ego but to his soul. If this section has been landing somewhere deep for you, take a moment to subscribe. This space isn't about tactics. It's about truth, and there's more of it coming. Now, here's the final piece. When you ignore a man from your center, not to hurt him, not to win him, but to return to your own nervous system, everything about your field changes. You no longer radiate urgency. You no longer perform safety for someone else. You become still enough for him to finally feel the tremors of his own avoided emotions. And in that silence, if he's ready, he will come. But if he's not, then he was only ever chasing the version of you who hadn't yet remembered her power. And that's not who you are anymore. There's a fine line between reclaiming your energy and weaponizing your silence. And this is where many women, especially those awakening to their power, must walk with discernment, not defense. Because the moment you begin to withhold your presence as a tool, rather than a truth, something within you quietly slips back into performance, into control, into the very dynamic you were trying to escape. You're not here to play emotional chess. You're not here to make him suffer. You're here to become whole, so whole, in fact, that your silence becomes sacred, not strategic. And yet, the temptation is real. To check if he's watching, to post that perfect story, to delay your reply just enough to keep him wondering, to play the role of the cool, indifferent woman when your heart still aches for his voice. This is the first pitfall, mistaking power for performance. Because the moment you perform stillness instead of embodying it, you've handed him the pen to write your worth again. You're no longer centered in yourself. You're reacting from a wound. And wounds, when dressed as power, create confusion instead of clarity. So here's the shift. Silence must not be about him. It must be for you. You're not trying to trigger his longing. You're tending to your own. You're not waiting for a reaction. You're rebalancing your nervous system. You're not hoping to be chased. You're choosing not to chase yourself anymore. Chase his potential, his energy, his apology, his effort. And when that shift happens, the silence feels different. It's not heavy, it's not strategic, it's not anxious, it's clean. You no longer need to know what he's thinking. You're too occupied with becoming the woman who no longer abandons herself for someone else's attention. But here's the second pitfall. Breaking your own boundary to chase clarity. Let me be honest with you, because I trust you can handle truth. The moment you reach out just to understand what happened, just to get closure, just to clear the air, you're not seeking clarity. You're seeking control. Emotional ambiguity is uncomfortable, I know. But clarity that must be extracted through effort is not clarity. It's anxiety masquerading as curiosity. If he wanted to bring resolution, he would. If he was ready to meet you, you'd know. If he were capable of emotional congruence, it wouldn't feel like you're decoding a puzzle every time he speaks. Your boundary is your teacher now. And here's something no one tells you. True power often feels boring at first. Why? Because it lacks the spikes of cortisol you once confused with chemistry. It doesn't create the roller coaster. It gives you your breath back. This is your third pitfall, confusing peace with absence. You may feel like nothing is happening. You may even question whether your stillness is working. But what's really happening is that you're moving out of emotional chaos and into quiet self-regulation. He may be gone. He may return. He may orbit silently. But none of that defines your new alignment. And that alignment? It's what changes everything. Because when you're no longer performing your worth, you're finally embodying it. You dress for yourself, not to be seen. You speak when you mean it, not to provoke. You hold space, not because it's noble, but because it's true. You've stopped asking for answers. You've stopped checking who's watching. You've stopped curating your light for an audience that was never capable of receiving it. Now, you radiate without aim. And that kind of woman, she disrupts timelines. When a man meets a woman who no longer performs for love, it unnerves him, because it reveals the ways he has been performing too. He sees your stillness and has to confront his imbalance. He feels your absence and begins to question who he is without your validation. He may feel rage, he may feel longing, he may even feel a desperate need to pull you back into orbit. But here's the power shift. You don't react, you notice, you observe, and then you choose. You choose whether his energy feels clear or contaminated. You choose whether his return is rooted in soul or ego. You choose whether your life has space for someone who only values you in your absence. Because this isn't about making him pay. This isn't about teaching him a lesson. This is about unlearning the idea that your softness, your support, your stability must be earned through endurance. It never had to hurt to be real. It never had to cost your voice. It never had to steal your light. Silence, when rooted in love for yourself, is not punishment. It is protection. It is a boundary written in frequency, not words. And the man who can feel that, really feel it, not with panic but with reverence, is the one who is ready to meet you where you are going. But if he never comes back, that's not your loss. It's your liberation. Because your energy is no longer up for negotiation. Your peace is no longer available as a project. And your worth is no longer on a leash, waiting for someone else's recognition. You are the mirror now, and only those ready to see themselves clearly will dare to enter your field. If you're still with me, still feeling this rise of truth in your chest, let me know in the comments what part of this feels like your story. Because when one woman shares, another remembers. He doesn't miss you, not the real you, not yet. He misses who he was around you. He misses the man who felt capable, interesting, needed. The man who felt seen. The man who could stand in your warmth and momentarily believe he'd arrived somewhere sacred, without ever asking himself how he'd earned access to that temple. That's the imprint you leave behind, not a memory. A mirror. A moment of activation he can't recreate with anyone else because it was never about what you did, it was about what you reflected. And now that the mirror is gone, his ego aches to see itself again. But you are no longer holding it up, because your absence is not emptiness. It is sacred space. It is the silence that finally allowed you to see yourself, not through his eyes, but through your own. And that woman, this new version of you, she doesn't prove, perform, or plead. She doesn't leave the door unlocked in case he returns. She doesn't make noise when she exits the story. She leaves in peace, and her absence speaks louder than any words ever could. If he returns, let it not be to reclaim what he lost. Let it be to meet what he never fully saw. Let it be not for his ego's comfort, but for his soul's growth. And if he doesn't, then you have gained something greater than love. You've gained clarity. Remember, you're not here to be remembered by his ego. You're here to be imprinted on his soul. Not because you stayed, but because you walked away with grace and never looked back. If this message has helped you reclaim something sacred inside yourself, subscribe. This channel isn't about tactics, it's about truth. And truth is how you come home to yourself. Your silence is your message. Your stillness is your power. And your energy is the standard now. Let him rise, or let him fade. Either way, you've already returned to the one person who will never abandon you again. You.